My husband said she was just a friend, until I walked in and saw them together in our bed. Part 1. The smile that lied. There's something chilling about realizing the person you love is lying, not with words, but with a smile. That's what it was with Daniel. His eyes still sparkled when he looked at me, his voice still warm, his arms still felt like home. But somewhere beneath all that, something had shifted. I didn't see it at first, or maybe I refused to. We met when we were just kids, college sweethearts, everyone called us. He was quiet, artistic, with this subtle charm that didn't scream for attention but held it anyway. I was louder, more ambitious, a planner, a dreamer. Somehow we balanced each other, and for a long time I thought we were happy, truly happy. We got married in the spring, under a canopy of trees in my grandmother's backyard. Everything about our life after that felt intentional. The home we bought and slowly renovated together, the late-night wine and movie marathons, the discussions about children, careers, the future. We had plans. God, we had so many plans. It was about a year ago when I noticed the shift. Nothing obvious. No lipstick stains, no perfume that wasn't mine. Just subtle things. A missed dinner here, a vague explanation there. He started working late more often, smiling at his phone more. Once I asked what was so funny. He shrugged and said it was a meme from a group chat. I believed him. Then came her name, Clara. He mentioned her casually, said she was a friend from his old design job, that she had started freelancing nearby and sometimes grabbed coffee with the team. I didn't even blink. I'm not the jealous type. I've always believed if you need to control someone to keep them, they're already gone. So I smiled, nodded, trusted. But Clara started showing up more in conversation. And not in ways I could pin down, just sprinkled through his stories almost too naturally. One night we were watching a show and he said, "Clara would love this kind of humor." I paused. He didn't notice. I brushed it off, once, twice, 3 times. Then I started noticing changes in him. He began wearing cologne again. Not the one I bought him, but something newer, more intense. He started dressing sharper, taking calls in the other room, locking his phone. I told myself he was just trying to reclaim his spark. We'd been through a rough few months. I had lost my job during layoffs, and I knew the stress had changed me. I blamed myself for the distance, convinced that if I just worked harder, smiled more, cooked his favorite meals, dressed prettier, things would settle. But it didn't. The night it all came crashing down was so quiet, it felt unreal. I'd gone out to visit my sister, stayed late helping her with her newborn. I came home around midnight. The house was dark, but I noticed a faint light upstairs. I should have knocked. I should have called out. Instead, I walked straight up the stairs into our bedroom. And there they were. Not just entangled, but comfortable, laughing, at ease. He didn't even jump when he saw me. She did, scrambling, reaching for the blanket. But Daniel, he just sat there, looking at me like I had interrupted something minor, something inconvenient. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I backed out of the room, walked downstairs, sat on the couch, and stared into nothing. He followed a few minutes later, dressed, still calm. I remember asking, "How long?" He said 6 months. 6 months of lies, of pretending, of looking me in the eye and saying he loved me, all while giving his heart and body to someone else. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't cry either. Something inside me had cracked open, but the pain hadn't come yet. Just a numbness, like I was watching someone else's life implode. In the morning, he made coffee like nothing happened. I packed a bag and left. He didn't stop me. That was the beginning of the unraveling, of the reckoning, of the slow, excruciating path to truth. Part 2. The aftermath wasn't loud. It was lonely. Grief isn't always loud. Sometimes it sits with you like fog, dense, invisible to everyone else, but suffocating all the same. After I left Daniel, I stayed with my sister in her guest room. It was barely big enough for a suitcase and a cot, but I didn't care. It was warm, and it didn't smell like him. That was enough. The first morning, I didn't get out of bed. My sister Emily brought me tea and tried to talk, but I couldn't find the words. How do you explain that your heart has been broken, not by some tragedy of fate, but by the person who once promised to protect it? I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was just stunned. Betrayal does that. It freezes you in place like your soul can't catch up with what your eyes have seen. Daniel didn't call. Not that first day. Not the second. On the third, he texted, "I'm sorry. Take all the time you need." That made it worse. Take all the time I need? As if I were grieving something simple. a missed vacation, or an argument. As if time could rewind what he did in that bed. I stared at that text for a long time. I almost replied, almost asked him if he loved her, if he ever truly loved me, but I stopped myself. There are questions that don't have real answers, only pain. Instead, I opened my laptop and emailed my manager. Hi, I'd like to return to work earlier than expected. Please advise on how to proceed. My job wasn't glamorous, operations at a mid-sized publishing house, but it was mine. And right now, I needed something to anchor me, even if it was deadlines and spreadsheets. When I came into the office that Monday, my coworkers looked at me like I'd returned from war. I must have looked the part. Dark circles, weight loss, a strange stillness behind my smile. I gave them nothing, just quiet hellos and the occasional nod. It was easier that way. I buried myself in tasks, numbers, projects, anything that kept my brain too busy to wander back to her. Clara. I tried not to imagine her voice, her perfume, her laugh echoing through the rooms I'd once considered mine. I failed. The nights were worse, lying in a strange bed, listening to the baby cry in the next room, while Emily and her husband tiptoed around me like I was broken glass. I didn't blame them. I barely recognized myself either. About 2 weeks after I left, Daniel emailed me. Not a text this time. An actual letter, long, detailed, measured, like he had spent hours editing every word. He said he never planned to cheat, that it just happened, that Clara understood him in a way he hadn't felt in years, that he hated himself for hurting me, but he also didn't regret discovering that connection. He called it complex. I called it cowardice. I didn't reply. I printed the email, tore it into 4 pieces and flushed them down the toilet. But the rage finally came. That night I cried so violently I collapsed on the bathroom floor. My body curled in on itself like it was trying to become smaller than the pain inside it. I bit into a towel to keep from waking the baby. I felt like a shadow of myself. No longer a wife, no longer in control of anything. The next morning I looked in the mirror and didn't like what I saw. Pale, sunken-eyed, hollow. That's when something shifted. Not quickly, not magically, just a flicker of something inside me. Maybe it was survival. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was fury. Whatever it was, I held on. I made a list. Get a lawyer. Find an apartment, call mom. Change bank account, password, schedule therapy. It felt small, laughably bureaucratic, but it was forward motion. And forward was the only direction left. I didn't call Daniel. Didn't respond when he asked if we could talk. I wasn't ready. Not because I still loved him, though I did in a horrible, aching way, but because I didn't know how to sit across from the man who gutted our marriage like it was an old coat he no longer wanted to wear. One evening, Emily handed me a letter. It came to the house, she said gently. Daniel's handwriting. Inside was a photograph. It was the two of us, him and me, taken the first month we moved into our house. We were on the floor, holding pizza, smiling like fools. On the back, he'd written, "We were real, I hope you know that." I stared at the photo for a long time. He wasn't wrong. We were real. We were also over. I put the photo in a box, closed the lid, and went online to schedule a viewing at a new apartment. Because what he and Clara had now, whatever it was, didn't erase what we'd had, but it also didn't excuse what he destroyed. And I wasn't going to wait around to see how their story ended. Part 3. Love Letters to a Stranger. Moving into the new apartment felt like stepping into someone else's life. It was smaller, no fireplace, no garden, no echoes of laughter or fights buried in the walls. But it was mine, and after everything that mattered more than space or views. I stood in the middle of the living room on the first night, surrounded by unopened boxes and a lamp flickering from the corner, and whispered, "You're safe now." I think I was talking to myself. The first thing I unpacked wasn't clothes or dishes. It was a framed photo of me, alone, taken on a hiking trip with friends 2 years before the marriage fell apart. I looked free in that picture, wind in my hair, face sun-kissed, laughing at something out of frame. I missed her, the version of me who hadn't yet been cracked open by betrayal. I placed her on the nightstand like a promise. Therapy helped, slowly. My therapist, a woman in her 50s named Carla, didn't offer pity. She offered clarity. She asked questions that burned. When did you first start disappearing in that marriage? What did love feel like when it became obligation? If you hadn't found the messages, how long would you have stayed? I hated her for asking, and then I loved her for it. Some nights I still cried, but it wasn't the same kind of cry. It wasn't about him anymore. It was about me, mourning all the versions of myself I'd lost trying to be enough. About a month into living alone, I found something unexpected in one of the boxes from our old house. A manila envelope, sealed, with my name in his handwriting. Inside were letters, 7 of them, written over the course of our last year together. Some were rambling confessions. Others were apologies he never had the courage to speak aloud. But one, the last one, was different. It wasn't about him, it was about me. You gave me more grace than I ever deserved. You taught me how to love gently, how to be still, and I still failed you. You were the best part of me, and I don't know who I am without that light. I hope one day you forget how I ended this, and remember only how you shined. I didn't cry. I just sat there holding the paper, realizing I didn't recognize the man who wrote it anymore. Because he wasn't mine. Not now. Maybe never truly was. I didn't burn the letters. I didn't respond either. I placed them in a drawer along with the old hiking photo, both parts of a chapter I was done rereading. In the following weeks, I started to laugh again. Genuinely. I met a woman in my building, Rose, a retired piano teacher with a silver pixie cut and a sharp sense of humor. She invited me for coffee one morning, and by afternoon we were trading stories about terrible exes and favorite books. She didn't ask what happened. She just saw me. That was enough. Sometimes healing doesn't look like revenge or redemption. It looks like sharing a joke with a stranger over stale cookies. It looks like going a whole day without thinking of him. It looks like remembering your favorite song and letting yourself dance to it in your kitchen. It looks like breathing, fully, deeply, for the first time in months. And one day, without noticing, I looked in the mirror and thought, she's back. The girl from the photo. Changed, yes, but stronger in places she never knew could grow. I didn't forgive him yet. Maybe I never will. But I forgave myself. For not seeing it sooner. For loving so deeply. For finally choosing to let go. Part 4. The Last Conversation. It happened on a Thursday, rainy, gray. The kind of day that used to call for takeout, warm socks, and old movies on the couch together. But now, it was just Thursday, and he called. Not text, not email. A real phone call. I stared at his name lighting up my screen like a ghost. Not someone I loved, but someone who haunted the parts of me I was still trying to recover. I almost didn't answer, but something inside me whispered, "You're ready." His voice was quiet, unsure. "Hey." It had been months since we'd spoken. Months since the house was sold, the divorce finalized, the lives officially untangled. Yet he still sounded like the man who once knew how I liked my coffee. I didn't ask how he was. I didn't want to know. He fumbled through small talk, work, his mom, the weather, then silence, and finally, I wanted to say I'm sorry, really sorry. I didn't say anything right away. I let the silence sit, let him feel the weight of it, the same weight I carried through hospital visits, sleepless nights, and the unraveling of a life we built together. You already said that, I finally replied, in the letters. I didn't think you'd read them. I did. Another pause. Then the real reason for the call. Do you hate me? I sighed, not from anger, but from exhaustion. No, I said honestly. I don't hate you, but I don't know you anymore, and I'm not sure I ever did. He didn't argue. Maybe he couldn't. Maybe he finally saw what I had been forced to learn, that loving someone isn't the same as being loved by them. I miss you, he said quietly. I closed my eyes. I missed me too. The me who used to believe forever meant something. You missed the version of me that didn't know, I said. You missed the woman who forgave quietly, who smiled through red flags, who built a home around someone else's lies. His breath caught. I miss the life we had. I nodded, though he couldn't see it. So do I, but it's gone, and I don't want it back. That was the moment I knew I was free, not because I was cruel, but because I was clear. He whispered, I hope you're happy. I will be, I said. I'm getting there. And then I ended the call. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't replay the conversation in my mind 100 times, wondering what I could have said better. I just stood there, listening to the silence. Not the heavy kind that once choked me, but the kind that felt like clean air after a storm. I lit a candle that night, not for him, for me, A small ritual, a quiet exhale, the beginning of something soft and new. That was the last time we ever spoke, and it was enough. Part 5. Becoming someone new. There's a strange kind of freedom in being broken, not the poetic kind people romanticize, not the kind where you cut your hair, travel to Bali, or dance under the stars. No, it's quieter than that. It starts in the small choices, the way you make your bed, the way you choose your own coffee mug instead of his, the way the silence in the house starts to feel like peace instead of punishment. I didn't rebuild overnight. I didn't wake up one day with strength in my bones and joy in my blood, but I did begin. At first, it was simple things. I started going for walks, not to clear my head, but because I had nowhere else to be. No one waiting at home. No one asking where I was. That kind of solitude used to terrify me. Now it was sacred. I bought flowers, not because anyone was coming over, just for me. I started journaling, writing not about him, but about me, who I was before him, who I had lost, who I wanted to become. One day I laughed at something stupid on the radio and caught myself in the mirror, surprised. It was the first time I'd heard my own laugh in months, maybe longer. I joined a pottery class. My hands were clumsy, my bowls collapsed, but it didn't matter. It felt good to make something, to shape mess into something that held water. There was a woman in the class named Tess, older, silver hair, eyes like warm tea. She noticed me sitting alone and sat beside me without asking. We didn't talk much the first time, but her presence was calm, like someone who had walked through her own fire and survived. The next week, she brought me a thermos of chamomile tea and said, "It gets easier, not because it hurts less, but because you get stronger." I didn't know how she knew, but I believed her. We started talking after class. She told me about the man she'd married young, the man who'd left her with 2 kids and a mortgage, the man she hadn't spoken to in 15 years. She said she didn't regret loving him, but she did regret losing herself in him. "Don't make the same mistakes," she said. "Love is supposed to expand you, not erase you." That stuck with me. One night, months later, I came home to the empty apartment, turned on music, and danced barefoot in the kitchen. Just because, not for anyone, not to perform, just to feel the ground beneath me. There's a moment in every healing story where you look around and realize you're okay, not healed, not whole, but okay. I wasn't there yet, but I could see it, a glimpse, a light just ahead, and I walked toward it, slowly, one honest step at a time. Part 6. The risk of opening again. It was at a bookstore of all places, the kind of cozy, slightly dusty shop that smelled like old pages and vanilla candles. I was browsing a shelf of forgotten paperbacks, running my fingers along cracked spines, when a voice behind me said, "That one's got a heartbreaking ending, just so you know." I turned, half expecting some awkward stranger with forced charm. Instead, I met a pair of eyes that looked just as tired as mine. Not worn out, just real. Lived in. His name was Evan. He held a copy of Wuthering Heights and wore a jacket that had clearly seen better winters. We talked for 10 minutes, then 20, then an hour, about books, life, regret. He said he came to the bookstore for quiet, not to meet people. I laughed and told him I came to avoid them. We didn't exchange numbers, not at first. I wasn't ready. I still flinched at love songs and deleted photos of my old life in the middle of the night. But I saw him again a week later. Same aisle, same warmth. He didn't push. He didn't flirt, not in the usual way. He asked questions like, "What do you miss most about who you used to be?" And when I didn't answer, he just nodded, like he understood. Over time, we started grabbing coffee after our accidental bookstore meetings. Then dinner. I told him about my marriage, not all at once, but in pieces. How I thought love meant sacrifice. How I made myself smaller to keep someone else whole. How I confused silence with strength. He listened. Not like someone waiting to talk, but like someone gathering your words in both hands and holding them gently. One night, I asked him why he never got married. He looked out the window for a long time and said, "I wanted to, but I fell in love with someone who loved someone else, and I didn't want to be the one they settled for." I saw myself in that sentence. The woman who had settled and the man who had waited. The first time he touched my hand, I froze. Not because I didn't want it, but because I did. And wanting something, someone, after being broken is terrifying. It's like standing on the edge of a cliff and daring to believe that maybe, just maybe, the fall might feel like flying. I told him I was scared. He said, "So am I. Let's be scared together." So we did. no promises, no fairy tales. Just two people, slowly learning that love doesn't always look like fireworks. Sometimes it's quiet, patient, and kind. And in that softness, I began to believe again, not in him, not in love, in myself. Part 7, When the Past Knocks. It started with a letter, not an email, not a text. A real letter, thick cream paper, folded in thirds, stuffed into an envelope with my name written in the same handwriting I used to find scrawled on birthday cards and sticky notes around the kitchen. It had been over a year since I saw Adam, long enough that the sound of his name didn't sting, but not long enough to forget the weight of everything he did. Long enough to start healing, but not enough to invite the past into my future. I stared at the envelope for hours. Evan noticed, of course, he always did. "You don't have to read it," he said, setting a cup of tea beside me. "You owe him nothing. But curiosity is a cruel itch, and closure, real closure, isn't always a clean break." Inside, the letter was handwritten. 3 pages. No excuses, he said. Just things he wanted me to know. Things I might never read, but he had to say. He talked about the affair, about how it didn't happen all at once, how it started with resentment, with distance, with 1,000 unspoken things neither of us addressed. He talked about how my strength scared him, how my silence felt like judgment, and how he mistook my patience for indifference. He didn't ask for forgiveness, only understanding. "I loved you," he wrote. "I still do, but I didn't know how to deserve you. And I broke us trying to feel whole." It wasn't an apology, not really, but it was human. I folded the letter, tucked it back into the envelope, and placed it in the bottom drawer of my desk, not out of spite, but because I finally understood that part of my life had an ending. Messy, painful, but complete. Later that week, I ran into him. Of all places, the grocery store, in the wine aisle. He was reaching for a bottle of red when he saw me, and his hand froze midair. For a second, neither of us spoke. "You look good," he said. "I am," I replied. And I meant it. There was no tension, no outburst, no need to say the things we had said 100 times in our heads. "I wrote to you," he added. "I know," he nodded. "I just hope you're happy." I looked at him, really looked at him, the man I had once built a life with, then watched burn it down. "I am," I said, for the first time in a long time. He smiled, small and sad, and walked away. That was it, not a final chapter. Just a closed door I no longer needed to keep peeking through. That night, Evan and I sat on the couch, my feet in his lap, the silence between us warm, not heavy. "Did it help?" he asked. I nodded. "It helped me see that I'm not angry anymore, just done. And being done, truly done, isn't rage or revenge. It's peace. It's quiet. It's finally being free of the weight you didn't know you were still carrying." Part 8, The Quiet Rebirth. It didn't happen with fireworks. No dramatic revelations, no sweeping music. It was a morning like any other. Overcast skies, coffee brewing, the cat meowing at the door. I stood barefoot in the kitchen, watching the sun slowly bleed through the clouds, and realized I hadn't thought of Adam in days. Not with pain, not with longing, just nothing. And that nothing felt like everything. For so long, I measured my healing by how much I could remember without crying. But real healing? It's when you stop remembering at all. When your life finally fills with so much now that there's no more room for then. Evan and I didn't rush into anything. He never asked me to be whole, only honest. We took things slow. Sunday hikes, silent dinners when the day felt heavy, shared books we never finished but always talked about anyway. He never filled the empty places in me. He just sat beside them until I could. One night we were curled up on the couch, my head on his chest, his fingers tracing idle circles on my back, when he said, "You don't flinch anymore when I say I love you." I blinked. I hadn't even noticed. That was the moment I knew. I had returned to myself. It wasn't about him or what we had. It was about me. I was no longer the woman who apologized for asking too much or made herself small for someone else's comfort. I no longer feared silence. I welcomed it. I filled it with thoughts, laughter, music, or nothing at all. I built a life that didn't need to be proven to anyone. One where trust wasn't blind, but chosen, where love wasn't dramatic, but safe. And on a sunny spring afternoon, a year after the letter and 2 years after everything fell apart, I married Evan. It wasn't a big ceremony, just a handful of friends, a lake, a soft breeze, and vows we wrote ourselves. He said, "I won't be perfect, but I will always be present." I said, I don't need perfect, I just need real. We kissed and the world didn't spin faster. It just felt still. And that stillness was everything I never knew I needed. Final words. If you're reading this in the middle of your own heartbreak, wondering if you'll ever breathe again without crying, hear me clearly. You will. One morning you'll wake up and realize you don't miss them anymore. One afternoon you'll laugh and not remember the last time you faked it. One night you'll fall asleep without replaying the betrayal in your head. And one day you'll love again. Not despite the pain, but because you rose from it. This story was never about the man who broke me. It's about the woman who learned to never break the same way again.